Whispered legends of the Merovingians have haunted the pages of European history for centuries, yet few truly understand the depth of the mystery that surrounds this ancient dynasty. Long before the rise of the modern nation-states of France and Germany, the Merovingians ruled the lands of the Franks, a people whose name would echo through history as warriors, conquerors, and kings. But what makes the Merovingians extraordinary is not merely their political power. It is the almost mythical aura that surrounds their lineage, a sense that these kings were no ordinary mortals. Tales of long-haired rulers who wielded both spiritual and temporal authority, kings said to possess uncanny insight or even supernatural abilities, are scattered across medieval chronicles, yet they are often dismissed as mere legend. The threads of these stories, however, suggest a hidden reality, a secret code embedded in bloodlines and symbols waiting to be deciphered. From the very beginning, the Merovingians were different. Childeric I, one of the earliest known kings of this line, is said to have had a golden treasure buried with him, adorned with mysterious symbols and strange artifacts whose meanings remain elusive even to modern scholars. His son, Clovis I, would go on to unify the Frankish tribes, converting to Christianity in a way that shaped the trajectory of Western Europe forever. Yet, even in these historical milestones, whispers linger of something beyond politics. Chroniclers hint at visions, divine favor, and powers that seem to transcend human capabilities. Some legends describe kings whose long hair was a source of strength, a sign of their sacred connection, a symbol that would later become a focus for secretive speculation about the nature of their lineage. What is especially intriguing is how the Merovingians were remembered and simultaneously erased. Many of their stories exist on the edge of history and myth, a blurred line where factual accounts meet folklore. In monasteries and hidden manuscripts, scribes recorded deeds of kings with almost supernatural overtones, battles won against impossible odds, uncanny foresight, and uncanny survival through treacherous political landscapes. Yet, as the Carolingians rose to power, these records were often rewritten or destroyed, leaving gaps and tantalizing clues. Could this have been intentional? Were these kings, their descendants, or their knowledge seen as threats to emerging power structures? The tantalizing gaps in historical records suggest a deliberate suppression, as if a powerful secret bloodline was quietly removed from the narrative of official history. The aura of mystery surrounding the Merovingians is further heightened by their supposed links to the divine. Some accounts hint that they were descendants of a sacred or even otherworldly lineage, a bloodline imbued with qualities beyond ordinary human rulers. This notion of divine ancestry set the Merovingians apart from other dynasties and created a sense of sacred kingship that resonated across generations. It is no coincidence that such ideas would later feed into the lore of secret societies and esoteric traditions, where bloodlines and hidden wisdom are intertwined. Legends of holy relics, sacred objects, and coded symbols associated with the Merovingians continue to capture the imagination of historians and occult scholars alike. The intrigue is compounded by the secrecy that seemed to envelop their lives. Unlike later kings whose courts were open to chroniclers, the Merovingians maintained a certain distance from public scrutiny. Stories describe clandestine rituals, mysterious gatherings, and sacred knowledge passed quietly from one generation to the next. It is as if the dynasty itself was aware of a truth too powerful or too dangerous for the wider world to witness. This idea of hidden knowledge, encoded in blood and ritual, sets the Merovingians apart not just as rulers, but as guardians of a secret that would echo through the centuries. Even the manner of their decline is shrouded in enigma. The do-nothing kings, as some chroniclers mockingly called the later Merovingians, were said to retain ceremonial power while the real authority shifted elsewhere. Yet, beneath this apparent decline, whispers suggest that the bloodline, its secrets, and perhaps even its influence persisted, carefully concealed. Scholars and conspiracy theorists alike have speculated whether the so-called fall of the Merovingians was an end or merely a transformation, a passing of the torch to those who would carry forward their hidden legacy. To understand the Merovingians is to step into a world where history and legend are inseparably entwined. It is a journey into a time where kings were more than rulers. They were symbols, custodians of knowledge, and perhaps bearers of a code that still waits to be uncovered. This story, long suppressed or ignored by conventional historians, challenges us to look beyond the surface, to question what we think we know about the past, and to consider the possibility that the greatest secrets may reside not in documents and treaties, but in bloodlines, symbols, and whispered tales passed down through the ages. And so, as we embark on this exploration of the Merovingian Code, the journey begins not with certainty, but with questions. Who were these kings, truly? What powers, knowledge, or connections did they possess? And what might have been deliberately hidden from the pages of history, waiting for those who dare to follow the trail of long-forgotten legends? The answers, if they exist, lie somewhere between fact and myth. And it is here, in the shadows of Europe's early medieval past, that the story of the Merovingians quietly begins. This version is immersive, cinematic, and sets the tone for the rest of the documentary, with rich detail, mystery, and subtle conspiratorial undertones, hitting roughly 1,000 words. If you want, I can expand Section 2 in the same style next, keeping the word count proportional to the overall outline. The origins of the Merovingian bloodline are shrouded in a fog of history, legend, and speculation, a murky blend of documented events and whispered myths that challenge even the most diligent historians. To trace the roots of this enigmatic dynasty is to wander through a landscape where fact and folklore intertwine, where every clue seems tantalizingly close yet frustratingly out of reach. The Franks themselves were a confederation of Germanic tribes, fierce and unyielding, whose early migrations across Europe were marked by conquest, alliances, and the ever-shifting dynamics of power. Amidst this turbulent backdrop, the Merovingians emerged, establishing a lineage that would become synonymous with both strength and mystery. Yet who, or what, truly lay at the foundation of this line of kings remains a question that has fueled speculation for centuries. Some scholars have argued that the Merovingians were descended from notable Germanic chieftains, warriors whose skill in battle and cunning in diplomacy set the stage for their rise to kingship. But alternative theories suggest a far more extraordinary ancestry, one that blends the divine, the mystical, and the unexplained. Certain medieval chronicles hint at a connection to the sacred blood, a lineage imbued with qualities that were believed to transcend ordinary human ability. Some interpretations even propose that the Merovingians were descendants of otherworldly beings, perhaps angels or figures touched by divine providence. While mainstream historians are quick to dismiss such claims as myth or propaganda, the persistence of these narratives through centuries suggests that there may have been a reason, perhaps a secret carefully protected, for such stories to endure. It is in this tension between historical record and legend that the true fascination of the Merovingians arises. Take, for instance, the stories surrounding their early kings. Childeric I, father of Clovis, was known as a formidable warrior and astute leader. Yet the artifacts discovered in his tomb hint at an identity that transcended ordinary nobility. Golden bees, intricate jewelry, and symbols whose meanings are still debated by archaeologists and occult scholars alike point to a lineage that revered secrecy, ritual, and symbolism. Such findings have fueled speculation that the Merovingians carried knowledge, perhaps esoteric or sacred, that was encoded not just in artifacts, but in their very blood. The intrigue deepens when considering Clovis I, whose conversion to Christianity is often presented as a straightforward historical event. Yet, Some alternative interpretations suggest that this conversion was far from ordinary. It may have been a strategic act designed to safeguard the bloodline, while simultaneously aligning with the emerging power of the Church. This duality, maintaining an inner, hidden knowledge while navigating public religious and political expectations, hints at a sophisticated understanding of power and influence. It raises the question, was the Merovingian legacy purely dynastic, or did it involve a carefully guarded secret meant to endure beyond the lifetimes of individual rulers? Even before the Merovingians came to prominence, whispers of an extraordinary ancestry followed them. Some theorists point to connections with mythic figures of antiquity, linking the dynasty to stories of ancient kings, seers, and even semi-divine heroes. There are hints of connections to the lineages of the biblical or Near Eastern worlds, suggesting that the Merovingians were more than a European phenomenon. Whether these claims are historically grounded or the product of later legend, they serve to elevate the Merovingians from the realm of ordinary monarchs to figures whose lineage was regarded as special, perhaps even sacred. This notion of a hidden or extraordinary origin is compounded by the deliberate opacity of early records. The Merovingians themselves seem to have cultivated a sense of mystery, ensuring that only fragments of their history remained accessible to the outside world. Stories of secret marriages, alliances, and rituals persist, yet much is left to interpretation. What survives in the historical record is tantalizing but incomplete. Mentions of remarkable kings, cryptic documents, and hints at a bloodline so significant that it needed to be concealed from rivals, from the church, or perhaps from the general populace entirely. Artifacts, symbols, and burial practices provide additional clues. The Merovingians were often interred with objects that suggested not only wealth, but knowledge and status beyond the ordinary. Some historians propose that these items were talismans, meant to protect the bloodline or to transmit secret knowledge to successors. Others see them as markers of power, reinforcing the myth of a king whose authority was as spiritual as it was political. Whatever the case, these material remnants act as silent witnesses to a dynasty that carefully curated its public image while safeguarding an enigmatic legacy behind the scenes. Even the geographical origins of the Merovingians carry an air of mystery. The early Frankish territories were crossroads of migrating peoples, trade, and conquest. Legends tie the Merovingians to these lands as if they were chosen by fate or some unseen force, their rise an inevitable unfolding of a hidden plan. Some scholars have noted patterns in their settlements and alliances that suggest more than political calculation, a strategic preservation of influence, culture, and perhaps sacred knowledge. It is as though the bloodline was consciously navigating the chaos of the early medieval world to ensure survival, continuity, and secrecy. To understand the origins of the Merovingians is to confront a paradox. They are at once historical and legendary, mundane and mystical. The challenge lies in separating fact from fiction while acknowledging that both elements may have been deliberately intertwined by those who sought to protect, elevate, or obscure the bloodline. Every artifact, every chronicle, and every fragment of legend contributes to a larger puzzle, one that hints at a dynasty whose true beginnings were deliberately hidden, encoded in symbols, rituals, and stories that only reveal their meaning to the careful observer. As we trace the origins of the Merovingian line, the picture that emerges is neither simple nor entirely knowable. What we see is a dynasty that blends human ambition with hints of the extraordinary, kings whose heritage may have been more sacred than political, whose power extended beyond armies and treaties, into realms of secrecy and hidden knowledge. And it is within this interplay of fact, myth, and speculation that the Merovingians truly captivate the imagination. A bloodline whose origin is as elusive as it is compelling, inviting those who follow the trail to question the very nature of history itself. The early Merovingian kings were not simply rulers of territory. They were enigmatic figures whose lives seemed to straddle the boundary between the human and the extraordinary. While historical accounts provide a skeleton of battles, treaties, and dynastic succession, it is the flesh of legend, rumor, and cryptic tales that gives these kings their enduring mystique. Clovis I, for instance, stands out as a figure of monumental importance, not merely because he unified the Frankish tribes, but because his actions and persona suggested an almost otherworldly influence. Chronicles speak of his courage in battle, his uncanny ability to inspire loyalty, and the decisive nature with which he reshaped the political landscape of early medieval Europe. Yet beyond the conventional accolades, whispers linger of events and abilities that defy simple explanation, hinting at powers inherited through a bloodline regarded by some as sacred. The allure of the early Merovingians lies in these anomalies. Childeric I, Clovis's father, left behind a legacy of mystery as much as of power. His tomb, discovered centuries later, contained not only treasure but objects whose meanings remain elusive. Among them were golden bees, small intricate carvings, and ornate jewelry, symbols whose significance was likely known only to a select few. Some scholars argue that these artifacts were simply luxurious adornments, markers of status and wealth, but others suggest a deeper purpose. The placement of objects in tombs, the particular choice of symbols, and the evident care taken in their crafting hint at coded messages, perhaps meant to guide descendants or to preserve hidden knowledge. These were kings who understood the importance of symbols, of ritual, and of secrecy, traits that would define the dynasty for centuries. Clovis I's rise to power is equally compelling. He did not simply inherit a kingdom. He conquered it, united disparate tribes, and established a dynasty that would leave an indelible mark on European history. Yet even in these well-documented achievements, there are hints of something beyond ordinary leadership. Legends speak of divine favor, victories in battles that seemed impossible, foresight in political alliances, and an almost preternatural ability to navigate treacherous circumstances. Chroniclers describe scenes where Clovis appeared guided by some unseen hand, making decisions that confounded even his closest advisors. While such accounts may be embellished, their consistency across various sources suggests that contemporaries perceived in him something unusual, a quality that set him apart from ordinary rulers. The mystique of the Merovingians was also reinforced by the peculiar traditions that surrounded their kingship. Unlike other monarchs of the time, Merovingian kings were closely associated with symbolic elements that signified sacred authority. Their long hair, for example, was not merely a stylistic choice, but a powerful emblem of strength and divine right. Cutting the hair of a Merovingian king was considered a symbolic act of humiliation, capable of stripping him of authority. This preoccupation with hair, seemingly trivial to outsiders, reflects a culture steeped in ritual and esoteric meaning, suggesting that the king's identity was inseparable from a sacred lineage that transcended the ordinary trappings of power. Yet, the Merovingians were not merely objects of fascination for the people. They were subjects of suspicion and sometimes fear. The extraordinary abilities attributed to these kings, from visions and prophetic insights to remarkable martial prowess, created unease among both allies and rivals. The Church, still consolidating its influence in early medieval Europe, may have perceived the Merovingians as a potential threat, a lineage whose spiritual significance could challenge ecclesiastical authority. Some historians speculate that this tension between sacred kingship and emerging religious power contributed to the selective recording of Merovingian history, where the extraordinary was minimized, ignored, or deliberately obscured. The stories surrounding the early Merovingians are further complicated by the interweaving of pagan traditions and Christian influence. Clovis's conversion to Christianity, A turning point in European history, was not only a political maneuver but also a ritual act laden with symbolic weight. By adopting the Christian faith, he aligned himself with the rising power of the Church, while simultaneously preserving the mystique of his own lineage. Some scholars argue that the conversion was a calculated effort to safeguard the bloodline, blending the spiritual authority of sacred kingship with the pragmatic necessity of political survival. This dual identity, king and almost divine figure, imbued the Merovingians with a depth that ordinary monarchs could scarcely comprehend. Even the mundane aspects of their rule take on a curious significance when viewed through the lens of mystery. The strategic placement of courts, alliances through marriage, and the succession of heirs were not merely political necessities, but carefully orchestrated moves designed to protect and perpetuate a secret heritage. The Merovingians appear to have understood that power is not only in armies or land, but in symbols, knowledge, and the careful cultivation of a narrative that could endure beyond the lifespan of any individual ruler. It is perhaps this blend of power, mystery, and secrecy that has kept the early Merovingians alive in the collective imagination. They were not kings who ruled only by decree. They were figures whose lives were interwoven with legend, whose actions seemed guided by forces both visible and unseen. Tales of battles won against improbable odds, of advisors who could not understand their insight, and of rituals designed to protect sacred knowledge all point to a dynasty that operated on multiple levels: political, spiritual, and mystical. To study the early Merovingians is to confront the extraordinary hidden beneath the ordinary. It is to recognize that these kings, whose names populate the annals of history, were also guardians of a deeper legacy, one encoded in blood, ritual, and symbol. Their lives hint at a truth deliberately obscured, a secret woven into the very fabric of their dynasty. And as we look back across the centuries, the question remains, what was this secret, and how did it shape not only the course of early medieval Europe, but the hidden currents of history that would follow? The Merovingians left behind more than just chronicles and tales of legendary kingship. They left symbols, relics, and artifacts that continue to captivate historians, esoteric scholars, and treasure seekers alike. These objects, scattered across tombs, churches, and hidden caches, seem to whisper a secret language of power, lineage, and sacred knowledge, a language encoded for those who knew how to read it. To explore the material legacy of the Merovingians is to step into a world where every object carries significance beyond its apparent function, where gold and jewels, ceremonial implements, and cryptic carvings may all point to a knowledge deliberately hidden from the uninitiated. Consider the treasures unearthed from the tomb of Childeric I, father of Clovis. Archaeologists discovered not only gold and garnet jewelry, but also a collection of small, enigmatic objects, bees cast in gold, intricate belt buckles, and ritual items whose exact purpose remains uncertain. The bees, in particular, have fascinated scholars and esoteric researchers alike. While they could be interpreted as simple symbols of royalty or industriousness, alternative theories suggest a deeper, almost coded meaning, possibly representing immortality, divine favor, or even the continuity of the bloodline itself. Bees recur in various cultures as symbols of sacred lineage. In the context of the Merovingians, they hint at a dynasty acutely aware of its unique position in the spiritual and temporal hierarchy. Beyond tangible artifacts, the Merovingians appear to have embedded meaning in symbols that adorned architecture, coinage, and personal items. The fleur-de-lis, which would later become synonymous with French royalty, is often linked to Merovingian iconography. Some historians propose that the symbol originated with the dynasty itself, serving as a subtle marker of their sacred bloodline. It is not merely an emblem of kingship, but a potential cipher, a visual code signaling divine authority and continuity. In this sense, even something as seemingly simple as a decorative motif becomes a tool of preservation, quietly transmitting knowledge through generations while remaining invisible to the uninformed observer. Sacred relics also play a significant role in understanding the Merovingian connection to esoteric knowledge. Relics were not merely objects of veneration or religious devotion. They were vessels of authority, conduits of legitimacy, and sometimes protectors of secret wisdom. Some accounts suggest that the Merovingians safeguarded items of extraordinary significance, objects said to be linked to Christ, to ancient prophets, or to mysterious powers beyond human comprehension. While many of these relics have been lost or destroyed over time, references persist in medieval chronicles and later esoteric writings, hinting at a collection of treasures that may have symbolized the dynasty's spiritual and political supremacy. The careful preservation of these objects was likely intentional. In a period of political instability, where kingdoms rose and fell and rivals vied for supremacy, the ability to encode meaning in objects allowed the Merovingians to safeguard knowledge that could survive dynastic upheaval. Some scholars have suggested that these artifacts were part of a broader system, a hidden curriculum of symbols, rituals, and relics that conveyed the essence of Merovingian authority. In this framework, power was not merely territorial. It was encoded in the bloodline, reinforced through ritual, and materially manifested in objects whose meanings were decipherable only to those initiated into the dynasty's secret knowledge. The interplay between pagan and Christian symbolism further complicates the Merovingian material legacy. As the dynasty navigated the transition from pre-Christian traditions to the emerging Christian order, they appear to have integrated sacred motifs from both realms. Relics, ceremonial objects, and symbols might carry dual meanings, one outwardly understandable within the Christian context, and another hidden, esoteric layer comprehensible only to those aware of the older, pagan wisdom. This blending of traditions suggests a sophisticated understanding of power. By outwardly aligning with dominant religious norms, the Merovingians could conceal the true depth of their knowledge while still transmitting it subtly across generations. Even funerary practices reflect this complex relationship between visible and hidden significance. The placement of objects within tombs, the orientation of burial sites, and the choice of accompanying artifacts all hint at an awareness of sacred geometry, ritual significance, and coded messaging. The Merovingians were not merely burying their dead. They were creating a narrative of authority, sanctity, and continuity that could survive beyond the immediate historical moment. These practices suggest a dynasty deeply conscious of its own mythos, one that actively shaped how it would be remembered or deliberately misremembered by future generations. Coins, another seemingly mundane artifact, also carry hidden meaning. Early Merovingian coinage often features unusual symbols and iconography, departing from the typical designs of the era. Some researchers suggest that these images were not purely decorative or economic in function, but may have acted as subtle markers of lineage, authority, or esoteric knowledge. Coins travel widely and endure over time, making them ideal vessels for the discreet transmission of messages to those who knew how to interpret them. The fascination with Merovingian artifacts is further fueled by the connection to later legends, particularly those of the Holy Grail. Some scholars propose that the Grail myth itself may be a symbolic representation of the dynasty's sacred bloodline, encoded in stories, relics, and symbols for posterity. Whether the Grail is a literal object or an allegorical metaphor, its association with Merovingian artifacts underscores the enduring perception of these kings as custodians of extraordinary knowledge. The treasures they left behind, both tangible and symbolic, act as breadcrumbs, pointing toward a deeper narrative that has persisted in secrecy through centuries of political upheaval and historical revision. In essence, the Merovingians understood that power extends beyond armies, treaties, and political machinations. It resides in symbols, objects, and the careful transmission of knowledge. Each artifact, each emblem, and each ritualized object serves as a testament to a dynasty that valued secrecy as much as sovereignty. These treasures are not merely relics of a bygone era. They are pieces of a coded legacy, a silent language designed to endure, guide, and protect the bloodline through the ages. To explore the Merovingian material legacy is to peer into a hidden world where history, myth, and esoteric wisdom intersect. It is to recognize that every golden bee, every intricately carved relic, every mysterious symbol carries a purpose, a message meant to convey power, preserve knowledge, and perhaps hint at truths too profound to be openly disclosed. The Merovingians were kings in the public eye, but in private, they were custodians of a secret that transcended time, a legacy embedded in artifacts that still speak across the centuries to those willing to listen carefully. The story of the Merovingians and the Knights Templar is one that has fascinated historians, conspiracy theorists, and seekers of hidden truths for centuries. At first glance, the two may seem separated by time. The Merovingian dynasty rising in the early medieval period, and the Templars emerging almost 5 centuries later during the Crusades. Yet, hidden beneath the surface of conventional history, there are tantalizing threads that suggest a profound connection, a silent hand guiding knowledge and power across generations. It is a story that requires us to step beyond the tidy lines of textbooks and into the shadowy corridors of whispered legend. The Merovingians, with their mysterious rituals and claims of a sacred bloodline, ruled over the Franks with a combination of spiritual authority and temporal power. Their kings, often described as possessing a divine spark or unique lineage, were revered, feared, and envied. But as history shows, dynasties rise and fall, and the Merovingians' dominance eventually waned. Their political influence was eclipsed by the Carolingians, and yet the whispers of their mystical significance did not die. Some scholars and theorists suggest that knowledge, relics, and even the very secrets of their bloodline were carefully preserved, passed down through hidden channels to those capable of safeguarding them. And this is where the Templars enter the story. Founded in the early 12th century, the Knights Templar were initially established to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. They were warriors, monks, and financiers all at once, a unique combination of military might, religious devotion, and economic acumen. But the Templars quickly became more than a protective order. They accumulated immense wealth, constructed architectural marvels, and developed a sophisticated network of communication and banking. Yet behind their public facade, some historians and theorists believe, lay a far deeper purpose: the stewardship of ancient secrets, the guardianship of knowledge that might have originated with the Merovingian kings themselves. The evidence for such a connection is subtle, elusive, and often circumstantial. Some point to early Templar initiation rituals and symbolism that echo what little is known of Merovingian ceremonial practices. The emphasis on secrecy, the reverence for relics, and meticulous preservation of knowledge all hint at a continuity of purpose. Perhaps the Templars were entrusted with protecting something far greater than gold or land, an understanding of lineage, a sacred bloodline, or even an esoteric code embedded within the Merovingian legacy. Such claims, of course, cannot be proven in the traditional sense, but the patterns are striking and demand contemplation. Consider the famous Rennes-le-Château, a small village in southern France that has become a focal point for Merovingian and Templar legends. In the late 19th century, a local priest named Bérenger Saunière uncovered what many believe were hidden messages, relics, or treasure linked to the Merovingians. While the specifics remain murky, the intrigue deepened when connections were drawn between Rennes-le-Château and Templar mythology. Some researchers argue that the village's mysteries were not merely local eccentricities, but echoes of a centuries-old system of knowledge carefully concealed by successive generations of custodians. Could the Templars have been the inheritors of these secrets, acting as the silent protectors of a lineage whose importance transcended mere politics? The fascination with the Merovingian Templar connection is further fueled by symbolism. The fleur-de-lis, for instance, a symbol closely associated with French royalty, is often linked to the Merovingians. Its presence in Templar iconography raises questions. Was it a mark of heritage, a subtle acknowledgement of a bloodline, or merely an ornamental motif appropriated later? And then there are tales of hidden scrolls, encoded manuscripts, and cryptic rituals, all whispered to contain knowledge passed down from the Merovingians to the Templars. While mainstream historians may dismiss these claims as fanciful, the enduring power of these legends speaks to something persistent, a story too compelling to fade entirely, regardless of historical accuracy. Financial and architectural evidence adds another layer to this intricate tapestry. The Templars' sudden rise in wealth and influence, their construction of grand cathedrals, fortresses, and chapels, may have been more than coincidental. Some theorists suggest that such resources were necessary to secure, hide, and study relics or documents tied to the Merovingian bloodline. The order's meticulous record-keeping, combined with their expansive network across Europe and the Holy Land, would have made them ideal stewards for secrets too sensitive to be left in the hands of any single ruler or institution. In this light, their apparent obsession with secrecy and ritual makes a kind of sense. It was part of a mission spanning centuries, connecting the fallen Merovingian kings to a new custodial order. The narrative becomes even more compelling when we examine the sudden and brutal dissolution of the Templars in the early 14th century. King Philip IV of France, deeply indebted to the Templars and wary of their power, orchestrated a campaign of arrests, trials, and executions. Officially, the Templars were accused of heresy, blasphemy, and other crimes, but the precision and scope of their destruction suggests something else at work. Could it have been the fear that the Templars, the keepers of sacred lineage and hidden knowledge, had grown too influential? Was the suppression of the order a deliberate attempt to sever the link between the Merovingians and the custodians of their secrets? While proof remains elusive, the circumstantial evidence tantalizes historians and storytellers alike. Beyond the historical intrigue lies the philosophical and symbolic resonance of the Merovingian Templar connection. It is a story about continuity, about the transmission of knowledge across generations, and about the lengths to which human societies will go to protect or suppress what they deem sacred. The Templars in this narrative are not just knights, but guardians of a legacy rooted in a dynasty that claimed more than kingship, a dynasty that may have carried secrets potent enough to unsettle the very foundations of power. Their story is a reminder that history is not merely what is written in chronicles or carved in stone. It is also the hidden currents, the veiled intentions, and the enduring mysteries that ripple beneath the surface. In exploring this connection, one begins to see the Merovingians and Templars not as isolated historical entities, but as 2 points on a continuum of secrecy, knowledge, and influence. The bloodline may have faded from public view, and the Templars may have been dismantled, yet the intrigue endures, echoing in myths, coded manuscripts, and whispered stories passed through the centuries. The Merovingian Code, if it ever truly existed, was not destroyed. It was transformed, concealed, and carried forward by those willing to guard it at all costs. And for the modern seeker, unraveling this web is both a historical challenge and a journey into the shadowy heart of European mysticism. Ultimately, the link between the Merovingians and the Templars serves as a narrative fulcrum in the broader story of hidden history. It is a bridge between the known and the unknown, the historical and the esoteric, the documented and the speculative. By examining this connection, we begin to see a world in which power, bloodlines, and knowledge intersect in ways deliberately obscured from plain view. It is a story that invites us to question what we accept as history, to imagine the silent guardians of ancient secrets, and to ponder the possibility that some truths are meant not for the masses, but for those who seek them quietly, patiently, and with care. In the end, the Merovingians and the Templars stand as twin symbols of mystery, their stories intertwined through centuries of myth, legend, and speculation. They challenge us to consider a history that is deeper, stranger, and more intricate than the conventional narrative allows. And as we move forward in this exploration, it becomes clear that understanding their connection is not merely an academic exercise. It is an invitation to follow the hidden paths of power, blood, and knowledge that may still influence the world today. The Holy Grail is perhaps one of the most enduring symbols of mystery in Western history, a legendary object that has captivated imaginations for centuries. Traditionally portrayed as a chalice that held the blood of Christ, a vessel of miraculous powers, or a sacred relic of unimaginable significance, the Grail has been the subject of countless quests, stories, and interpretations. Yet beneath these familiar narratives lies a far more enigmatic possibility, one that connects the Grail not merely to a physical object, but to a hidden lineage, a secret preserved through time, and a knowledge so profound that it could reshape our understanding of history itself. The Merovingians, with their claims of divine blood and mystical heritage, emerge as central figures in this reinterpretation, casting the Grail in a new, almost conspiratorial light. The traditional stories of the Grail, woven into medieval romances and chronicles, paint it as a distant, almost unattainable prize. Knights embark on perilous journeys, facing dragons, sorcery, and moral tests, all in pursuit of a vessel whose powers remain shrouded in legend. In these tales, the Grail embodies purity, divine favor, and spiritual enlightenment. But when examined through the lens of esoteric theory, the Grail begins to appear less as a tangible cup and more as a symbol of lineage, inheritance, and the continuity of sacred blood. Some theorists argue that the Grail stories were never intended as literal quests. Instead, they encoded the secrets of the Merovingian dynasty, a bloodline believed to carry divine essence from biblical times through early medieval France. In this reading, the Grail is not an object, but a cipher, a key to understanding the hidden power of a family whose influence was deliberately obscured. One of the most compelling strands of this interpretation comes from the Gnostic and early Christian traditions. In certain apocryphal texts, there are cryptic references to a holy blood or a sacred lineage, sometimes described in metaphorical language that parallels the Grail stories. These texts suggest that divine favor or enlightenment was not conferred through objects or relics alone, but through birthright, ancestry, and the careful preservation of knowledge. The Merovingians, by virtue of their mysterious origins and the rituals surrounding their kingship, were often portrayed as bearers of this sacred line. If the Grail legends are interpreted symbolically rather than literally, the connection between these medieval kings and the Grail becomes more than plausible. It becomes compelling. The theory that the Grail represents bloodline rather than cup also offers a lens through which to reinterpret the vast array of Grail iconography scattered across Europe. Frescoes, illuminated manuscripts, and architectural carvings frequently depict symbols that have puzzled historians for centuries. Chalices, vines, and sacred geometries intertwined with royal heraldry. Could these images be subtle markers, clues left behind by those who sought to preserve knowledge of the Merovingians' lineage? Many researchers argue that these symbols were deliberately encoded to be intelligible only to those initiated into a hidden tradition, a system of knowledge that the Templars and other secret societies may have later inherited. The Grail, in this sense, becomes a narrative device to conceal rather than reveal, a story told in plain sight, waiting for those with the insight to decode its deeper meaning. This interpretation also sheds light on some of the more peculiar elements of Grail lore. The stories often emphasize secrecy, moral tests, and a need for purity of heart and mind, qualities that echo the rituals surrounding Merovingian kingship. Only those deemed worthy could approach the Grail, just as only those of proper lineage or spiritual readiness might inherit or understand the hidden knowledge carried by the bloodline. The perilous quests of knights can thus be seen as allegories, teaching the principles necessary to safeguard sacred secrets rather than literal adventures. Each challenge, each guardian, and each coded message becomes part of a centuries-long effort to transmit knowledge while keeping it shielded from those who might misuse it. Medieval sites such as Rennes-le-Château, Montségur, and other obscure locations in France further amplify this connection between the Grail and the Merovingians. Local legends describe hidden treasures, secret documents, and mysterious symbols carved into stone, often associated with both royal lineages and religious orders. These sites have long been the focus of scholarly inquiry and conspiracy theory alike, suggesting that the Grail's significance is as much geographic and symbolic as it is spiritual. When viewed through this lens, the Grail is not confined to a single object or moment in history, but exists as a living, layered legend, intertwined with place, lineage, and the careful orchestration of secrecy across generations. Modern fascination with the Grail often revolves around the Templars, whose sudden rise to power, meticulous record-keeping, and obsession with ritual have led some to speculate that they were the custodians of the Merovingian secrets, including the true nature of the Grail. The Templars, it is argued, may have preserved relics or texts that explicitly linked the bloodline to divine favor, using the Grail myth as a cover to conceal the truth. When the order was violently disbanded in the early 14th century, many of these secrets are believed to have been hidden or smuggled away, continuing the pattern of historical suppression that has so often surrounded the Merovingians. In this context, the Grail legend becomes both a protective narrative and a tantalizing hint at a deeper, hidden reality. The symbolic reinterpretation of the Grail also invites reflection on its enduring cultural impact. From Arthurian romances to modern literature, film, and conspiracy theory, the Grail continues to captivate our collective imagination. Its persistent allure may stem not merely from its narrative drama, but from an innate human fascination with hidden truths and inherited power. The idea that the Grail represents a bloodline rather than a vessel resonates deeply because it suggests that history, mystery, and destiny are intertwined in ways that ordinary chronicles fail to capture. The Merovingians, as custodians of a sacred lineage, become emblematic of this hidden order, a reminder that the most profound mysteries often lie not in objects but in connections, relationships, and heritage. Ultimately, revisiting the Grail legends through the lens of the Merovingian bloodline challenges us to rethink what we know about medieval Europe, the nature of power, and the transmission of knowledge. It is a reminder that symbols, stories, and rituals often carry layers of meaning intentionally obscured from the uninitiated. The Grail, then, is more than a tale of chivalry or divine favor. It is a key, a metaphor, and perhaps even a warning. It points toward a lineage whose secrets were worth guarding at all costs, a narrative carefully preserved across centuries, concealed in plain sight, waiting for those willing to discern the hidden truth. In this light, the quest for the Grail becomes not an adventure through distant lands, but a journey through time, symbolism, and the corridors of forgotten knowledge. The Merovingians, with their enigmatic rituals and sacred bloodline, are central to this story, and the Grail itself transforms from a mythical cup into a living symbol of continuity, secrecy, and the enduring power of hidden truths. By tracing these connections, we begin to glimpse a history that lies just beneath the surface, a world in which lineage, legend, and mystery converge, challenging us to reconsider the stories we think we know and to explore the shadows where the most profound truths often reside. Europe, in the shadow of its rolling hills and ancient forests, is dotted with sites that carry whispers of the past, places that seem ordinary at first glance, but, upon closer inspection, reveal layers of hidden significance. For the Merovingians, these landscapes were not merely backdrops to their reign. They were carefully chosen arenas where power, ritual, and the sacred converged. Sacred geography, the notion that certain locations are imbued with spiritual, cosmic, or mystical resonance, becomes a vital lens through which to understand the dynasty's enduring influence. From obscure crypts to grandiose churches, these sites were far more than political centers. They were nodes of a secret network, points on a map of hidden knowledge, deliberately aligned with celestial, spiritual, and symbolic meaning. The Merovingians, like many ancient rulers, were acutely aware of the power of place. Their burial sites, for instance, were rarely casual. They were meticulously selected, often in areas of strategic or spiritual importance. Tombs, mounds, and crypts were designed to connect the earthly and the divine, allowing the kings to exert influence even in death. The famous burial site at Saint Denis, later expanded and associated with French royalty, is thought to hold echoes of this early practice. Archaeological and historical records suggest that these locations were chosen not only for their prominence, but also for their perceived sacredness, a silent testament to the dynasty's awareness of the landscape's latent power. Beyond tombs, the Merovingians left traces of their presence in sacred rivers, groves, and stone circles. Some theorists suggest that these natural features were carefully mapped to correspond with celestial events, such as solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles. In this sense, the geography itself becomes a tool of power, a living instrument through which the dynasty could assert spiritual authority. A ritual performed in alignment with a rising sun over a particular hill, or a sacred grove that marked a seasonal change, was not merely symbolic. It was a way of harmonizing human action with cosmic order. Such practices, if true, hint at an esoteric understanding of the universe, preserved and transmitted through careful attention to place. Some sites carry stories that are both tantalizing and eerie. Hidden in underground crypts, inaccessible chambers beneath abbeys, and ruined fortresses deep in the French countryside are often associated with secret rites or hidden treasures. Many of these locations are entwined with Grail legends or rumored Merovingian relics, suggesting a continuity of sacred geography through time. Rennes-le-Château, perhaps the most famous of these enigmatic sites, offers a vivid example. The village and its surrounding terrain are laden with cryptic symbols, inscriptions, and architecture that some argue encode a knowledge inherited from the Merovingian line. Whether these were intended as literal maps, spiritual markers, or protective concealments, they serve as evidence of a dynasty deeply invested in embedding their legacy within the land itself. The interplay between sacred geography and political control is also significant. By selecting, marking, and perhaps even manipulating sites of spiritual importance, the Merovingians could exert influence over both the material and the mystical realms. Sites became more than points of physical power. They were focal points for ritual, pilgrimage, and social cohesion. Common people may have visited these locations unaware of the layers of meaning woven into the stones and landscapes, while the ruling elite understood the deeper codes and significance. In this way, geography itself becomes a language, a silent script written into hills, rivers, and forests that communicates lineage, authority, and esoteric wisdom. Architecture, too, plays a critical role in this network of power. Churches, abbeys, and cathedrals were often positioned and constructed with meticulous attention to orientation, proportion, and symbolism. Some structures align with astronomical events, casting shadows in ways that illuminate hidden inscriptions or sacred relics only on certain days of the year. These architectural marvels functioned as more than places of worship. They were repositories of encoded knowledge, subtle markers of Merovingian influence, and beacons for those who understood the hidden language of the land. Stone carvings, reliefs, and inscriptions often incorporate cryptic symbols, celestial motifs, and heraldic elements that link the dynasty to a broader cosmology, further intertwining place and power. Even in the realm of folklore, geography carries profound weight. Legends associated with mountains, springs, and caves often intersect with historical Merovingian sites, suggesting a deliberate fusion of story and space. These narratives frequently contain allegories of divine favor, hidden bloodlines, or sacred knowledge, connecting the physical terrain to the mythic framework surrounding the dynasty. Through these stories, the land itself becomes a vessel of memory, preserving secrets that cannot be fully captured in written records or oral history alone. The concept of places of power also extends beyond France. Sites across Europe, particularly those with megalithic origins, appear to have been integrated into a broader symbolic network that the Merovingians may have tapped into or inherited. Stone circles, alignments, and ancient shrines carry an aura of mystery that transcends individual dynasties, suggesting a continuous awareness of sacred geography stretching back to prehistoric times. The Merovingians, through their ritual practices, constructions, and deliberate choice of locations, may have inserted themselves into this larger network, creating a tangible legacy embedded in the very fabric of the land. Modern researchers, cryptographers, and esoteric enthusiasts continue to explore these sites, often uncovering connections that were previously overlooked. Maps, survey records, and architectural analysis hint at intentional alignment and orientation, while subtle patterns in folklore and manuscript illustrations point to a coherent vision of sacred geography maintained over centuries. Whether one views these discoveries as evidence of deliberate Merovingian planning, mystical intuition, or simply coincidence, the cumulative effect is undeniable. The land itself becomes a storyteller, whispering secrets to those willing to listen closely. Ultimately, the study of sacred geography illuminates a fundamental truth about the Merovingians. They understood that power is not confined to the throne or the battlefield. It exists in the earth beneath our feet, the alignment of stars, the sacredness of rivers, hills, and groves. By embedding their legacy in the landscape, they created a network of influence that could survive dynastic collapse, political upheaval, and centuries of erasure. The geography itself is a map of memory, a living testament to a dynasty that understood that true power is as much about subtlety and continuity as it is about force and conquest. In exploring these sacred places, we come to appreciate the Merovingians not simply as historical rulers, but as custodians of a hidden system of knowledge, one where land, architecture, and ritual converge to preserve a lineage, a story, and a secret. The echoes of their presence remain in hills, forests, and stone structures, waiting for those who follow carefully along the hidden paths they once walked, ready to reveal a history that lies beneath the surface, written in the very geography of Europe itself. The allure of the Merovingians extends far beyond their bloodline and sacred geography. It is amplified by prophecies and the enduring legends that have grown around their dynasty. In the shadows of history, whispered predictions and cryptic visions suggest that these kings were not ordinary rulers, but bearers of a destiny intertwined with divine will, cosmic forces, and hidden knowledge. Prophecies, both medieval and later, provide an intriguing lens through which to view the dynasty, as if fate itself conspired to preserve their story across the centuries, leaving behind cryptic signposts for those who could read between the lines. Medieval chroniclers and mystics frequently alluded to the Merovingians in enigmatic language, sometimes framing them as divinely chosen or as carriers of a secret that could shape the course of Europe. Some texts hint at a lineage so powerful that it could influence the rise and fall of kingdoms, yet deliberately obscured from common knowledge. These prophecies often combined historical observation with mystical interpretation, blending fact, allegory, and visionary insight into a tapestry of expectation that scholars and enthusiasts continue to examine. The very ambiguity of these writings ensures that the legends surrounding the Merovingians remain alive, as each generation reinterprets them through the lens of contemporary understanding. One of the most famous sources of prophecy often linked to the Merovingians is the work of Nostradamus, the 16th century seer whose cryptic quatrains have fascinated readers for centuries. While his writings are notoriously vague, certain passages have been interpreted as referencing a hidden bloodline or secret rulers whose influence operates behind the visible structures of power. Scholars debate the validity of these claims, yet the fascination persists. Nostradamus's work provides an atmospheric bridge between medieval dynasties and modern mysticism, connecting the Merovingians to enduring patterns of secrecy, influence, and destiny. Earlier medieval prophecies also lend a sense of gravitas to the Merovingian story. Saints and seers, such as Saint Malachy, were said to have predicted shifts in leadership, divine favor, and the eventual obscuring of certain lines of kings. While historical verification is difficult, the mere existence of such writings adds weight to the notion that the Merovingians were perceived, even in their own time, as extraordinary. Prophecies often included symbolic language, references to stars, natural events, or coded numerology that required interpretation, suggesting a deliberate attempt to veil knowledge from casual readers while signaling it to the initiated. In this sense, prophecy becomes both a protective mechanism and a narrative device, preserving the dynasty's secrets across centuries. The endurance of these prophecies is closely linked to the broader mythos of hidden knowledge. Legends of the Grail, sacred relics, and divine blood intersect with predictions of fate, suggesting a coherent, albeit esoteric, framework in which the Merovingians operate. Prophecy functions not merely as prediction, but as instruction. It communicates what is valuable, what must be preserved, and what is under threat of loss. The repetition of prophetic motifs, hidden heirs, sacred blood, impending revelation, reinforces the sense that the Merovingian legacy was both fragile and supremely important, a secret designed to outlast the obvious forces of history. Prophecies also serve to explain the dynasty's dramatic decline and the subsequent erasure of its influence. While the Carolingians supplanted the Merovingians politically, the persistence of these predictions suggests that the spiritual or esoteric power of the bloodline may have endured beyond its temporal reign. Chroniclers hint at hidden heirs, exiled princes, and secret guardians who carried forward knowledge, rituals, and sacred symbols in the shadows. Prophecy, in this sense, operates as a narrative thread linking the dynasty's apparent disappearance to a broader, ongoing story that transcends conventional history. The resonance of Merovingian prophecies is amplified by the intertwining of legend and geography. Sites such as Rennes-le-Château, Montségur, and various crypts and abbeys carry both tangible evidence and folklore of prophetic significance. Symbols carved into stone, cryptic inscriptions, and subtle alignments with celestial events often align with the themes found in written prophecies. These physical markers, coupled with mystical narratives, suggest a deliberate effort to encode knowledge in ways that transcend time and textual preservation. The land, like prophecy itself, becomes a canvas for memory, destiny, and the hidden continuity of a sacred bloodline. Even in modern times, the fascination with Merovingian prophecies continues to inspire research, speculation, and storytelling. Authors, historians, and enthusiasts explore connections between cryptic texts, architectural clues, and historical events, often uncovering patterns that appear deliberate, if elusive. Some claim that these predictions have contemporary relevance, hinting at unresolved mysteries or hidden influences in current political, religious, or social structures. Whether true or speculative, the enduring interest in prophecy keeps the Merovingians alive in the cultural imagination, a testament to the power of narrative to transcend centuries. The psychological allure of prophecy lies in its dual nature. It both conceals and reveals, guiding the attentive reader toward truths hidden from ordinary perception. In the context of the Merovingians, prophecy becomes a bridge between past and present, visible and hidden, historical record and mystical interpretation. It underscores the dynasty's significance beyond mere rulership, suggesting that their influence was not entirely temporal, but spiritual, symbolic, and encoded for those capable of perceiving it. The prophetic framework transforms the Merovingians from historical figures into enduring archetypes of hidden knowledge, bloodline power, and cosmic significance. Ultimately, prophecies surrounding the Merovingians reinforce a central theme of their story: the tension between visibility and secrecy, revelation and suppression, history as it is written and history as it is hidden. They remind us that some truths are layered, meant to be uncovered slowly, deliberately, and with discernment. By following the clues embedded in these predictions, we gain a deeper understanding of the dynasty's role in shaping not only European history, but also the myths, legends, and spiritual narratives that continue to captivate the imagination today. In this light, the Merovingians are not merely a dynasty of the past. They are a living presence in the ongoing dialogue between prophecy, power, and secrecy, a reminder that history is never fully seen and that some legacies endure in the shadows long after their kingdoms have vanished. History is rarely neutral. It is written by those who emerge victorious, by those who have the power to shape memory, perception, and narrative. For the Merovingians, the tides of history were not kind. Though they had ruled over the Franks for centuries, their legacy was gradually eclipsed, obscured, and actively suppressed by the Carolingians, a rival dynasty whose rise was as strategic as it was ruthless. The story of this oppression is not merely political. It is a profound example of how knowledge, influence, and sacred lineage can be deliberately erased from collective memory, leaving behind only whispers, fragments, and the faintest echoes of what once was. The transition of power from the Merovingians to the Carolingians was not an abrupt coup, but a slow, calculated process. Political maneuvering, alliances, and subtle manipulation allowed the Carolingians to consolidate power while minimizing public upheaval. At the same time, the Merovingians were systematically stripped of authority, reduced to ceremonial figures whose influence over law, religion, and society was increasingly symbolic rather than practical. This reduction of visible power was accompanied by an equally insidious process: the erasure of history. Chronicles that had previously documented the Merovingian dynasty were rewritten or neglected. Records, annals, and documents that might have preserved knowledge of their rituals, lineage, or sacred status were destroyed, hidden, or allowed to fade into obscurity. Suppression took many forms. Public memory was reshaped through the rewriting of history, emphasizing the legitimacy and accomplishments of the Carolingians while downplaying or ignoring the Merovingians. Monuments, inscriptions, and artifacts were repurposed, reattributed, or even destroyed, further erasing evidence of the dynasty's prominence. Even the Merovingian kings themselves, once figures of immense spiritual and political significance, were recast in later historical narratives as weak or ineffectual, their mystique replaced with tales of decadence or decline. This deliberate reshaping of history serves as a reminder that power extends not only over people and land, but over memory itself. Beyond official chronicles, legends and folklore also played a role in suppression. Stories that once celebrated Merovingian divinity or sacred lineage were recast, moralized, or trivialized. Sacred rituals were relegated to myth or rumor, stripped of the deeper significance understood by those initiated into the dynasty's mysteries. Even the symbolic elements of their rule, long hair as a mark of sacred authority, sacred sites, and religious ceremonies, were dismissed as eccentricities rather than acknowledged as expressions of a carefully preserved esoteric tradition. In this way, suppression was both external, through politics and historical revision, and internal, through cultural reinterpretation that neutralized the dynasty's spiritual and mystical significance. The deliberate destruction or concealment of artifacts played a crucial role in this erasure. Precious manuscripts, relics, and regalia that might have substantiated the Merovingians' claims of sacred authority were systematically hidden, dispersed, or destroyed. In some cases, these items may have survived, but were repurposed, their origins obscured or reattributed to other lineages or institutions. Such acts were not merely administrative. They were strategic, ensuring that the deeper knowledge of bloodline, ritual, and sacred power would remain inaccessible to ordinary observers. The consequence was a historical void, a deliberate silence in the record that continues to challenge historians, researchers, and seekers of esoteric knowledge today. Religious institutions, too, were complicit in this subtle form of suppression. The Church, a powerful force in medieval Europe, often aligned with the Carolingians, emphasizing the legitimacy of the new rulers while quietly sidelining Merovingian influence. Sacred texts and teachings that once reinforced the dynasty's mystical significance were either reinterpreted or removed from circulation. The intertwining of religion and politics made it increasingly difficult for any narrative favorable to the Merovingians to persist, as ecclesiastical authority became a key arbiter of historical memory. In this context, the suppression of the Merovingians was not only a political maneuver, but a spiritual one, a conscious shaping of what would be remembered, believed, and revered. Yet even in the face of systematic erasure, the Merovingians' presence lingered. Cryptic references in manuscripts, symbolic architecture, and whispered legends persisted, often encoded in ways that ordinary readers might overlook. Hidden messages in stone carvings, subtle alignments of sacred sites, and the survival of oral traditions suggest that the dynasty's influence was never entirely extinguished. Instead, it was transformed, existing in shadow, concealed from public view, but accessible to those who knew where and how to look. In this way, suppression paradoxically ensured the survival of mystery, as what is hidden becomes more alluring, more powerful in the imagination of future generations. Modern scholarship often struggles to reconcile the Merovingians' apparent insignificance in mainstream historical narratives with the depth of evidence suggesting their importance. The selective survival of sources, the intentional silences, and the reattribution of achievements all complicate the task of reconstructing their story. Yet these very gaps provide fertile ground for speculation, esoteric theory, and alternative interpretations. The absence of definitive records is itself a form of power, compelling researchers to read between the lines, to seek out coded messages, and to explore landscapes, artifacts, and folklore that carry the echoes of a dynasty deliberately muted by history. The suppression of the Merovingians is a stark reminder that history is never neutral, that the stories we inherit are shaped as much by those who record them as by the events themselves. The dynasty's fall from political prominence and the erasure of their spiritual and mystical legacy illustrate the intersection of power, memory, and secrecy. Yet the persistence of legends, prophecies, sacred sites, and cryptic symbols reveals a countercurrent, a lineage and a legacy that continue to whisper through the ages, challenging us to look beyond conventional accounts, to question what has been hidden, and to consider the forces that shape not only kingdoms, but the very record of their existence. Ultimately, the story of suppression sets the stage for the Merovingians' enduring mystique. Their narrative is not fully lost. It survives in shadows, myths, and coded histories, waiting to be rediscovered and interpreted. In understanding how their history was deliberately obscured, we gain insight not only into the mechanics of power in medieval Europe, but into the enduring allure of secrecy, the potency of hidden knowledge, and the subtle ways in which legacies can persist long after dynasties have disappeared from the page. It is a story of erasure and survival, of concealment and revelation, a reminder that even when history is silenced, the echoes of its secrets can resonate for centuries, inviting those with curiosity, patience, and insight to uncover the hidden truth. The Merovingians were not just rulers. They were custodians of symbols, artifacts, and hidden codes that silently conveyed their power, beliefs, and mysteries to those capable of reading them. Long before literacy was widespread, societies relied on visual language, symbols etched in stone, crafted in metal, or painted on parchment, to communicate ideas that transcended words. For the Merovingians, symbolism was not merely decorative. It was a language of lineage, authority, and esoteric knowledge, designed to preserve secrets across generations. Every coin minted, every seal stamped, every carving on a church or tomb was a message layered with meaning, waiting for the discerning eye to uncover its hidden significance. Merovingian coins, for example, are far more than instruments of trade. Many feature symbols that, to the casual observer, appear as simple royal emblems or artistic flourishes. Yet scholars and esoteric researchers have noted recurring motifs: rays of the sun, abstract depictions of sacred geometry, and subtle signs reminiscent of angelic or divine connection. Some coins depict figures with elongated forms, stylized crowns, or celestial imagery, suggesting a deliberate encoding of spiritual or cosmic knowledge. Through these small, portable objects, the dynasty could communicate power, sacred lineage, and esoteric principles, effectively embedding their secrets into the everyday lives of their subjects, long after the kings themselves had passed from the public eye. Seals and signets offer another layer of coded communication. The Merovingians, like other elite families of the time, used intricate seals to authenticate documents, proclamations, and property transfers. Yet these seals often contained symbols whose meanings extend far beyond administrative function. Certain geometric patterns, animal motifs, and monograms appear repeatedly, suggesting an internal language, perhaps even a mnemonic device, preserving knowledge of rituals, bloodlines, or sacred sites. To the uninitiated, a seal was a signature. To those trained in interpretation, it was a key, a guide to understanding hidden networks of power and influence. The dynasty's connection to sacred architecture amplifies the importance of these symbolic messages. Churches, abbeys, and crypts constructed under Merovingian influence were often imbued with a careful blend of geometric precision, celestial alignment, and visual metaphor. Doorways, arches, and altars were placed according to principles that combined both spiritual and astronomical significance. Frescoes and reliefs incorporated symbolic motifs, from vines and stars to stylized representations of celestial bodies, all interwoven with references to lineage, divine favor, and ritual practice. Some sites reveal a subtle integration of sacred numerology, with a number of columns, steps, or chambers aligned with patterns of ancient mystical significance. These constructions functioned as both houses of worship and repositories of hidden knowledge, their architecture encoding truths meant to endure long after the dynasty's political influence waned. Manuscripts, too, played a critical role in the preservation of Merovingian secrets. Illuminated texts, often painstakingly hand-copied by scribes, incorporated layers of symbolism within marginalia, illustrations, and calligraphy. The careful interplay of color, shape, and image could conceal hidden genealogies, esoteric wisdom, or references to sacred sites. Such codified knowledge was rarely meant for the broader public. Rather, it was intended for select readers capable of deciphering these visual codes. These manuscripts served as intellectual vaults, safeguarding information that, if discovered, might reveal the dynasty's sacred and mystical dimensions to the world. Artifacts attributed to the Merovingians extend beyond the mundane into the extraordinary. Jewelry, ceremonial objects, and regalia often exhibit intricate designs that suggest dual purposes, ornamentation for display, and encoded markers of secret knowledge. Gemstones may have been arranged according to numerological significance, while the shapes of ceremonial crowns, scepters, and other regalia hint at alignment with cosmic principles or divine symbolism. Each artifact, in essence, is a puzzle, a silent testament to a sophisticated culture that understood the power of concealment and the endurance of coded communication. The very materiality of these objects ensures that their messages survive the ravages of time, waiting for discovery by those with insight and curiosity. Hidden codes, in particular, reflect the Merovingians' awareness of both human and divine perception. Some researchers have identified recurring patterns in inscriptions, designs, and even architectural layouts, suggesting the use of cryptography or symbolic logic. These codes may have served multiple purposes: to protect sensitive information, to signal allegiance, or to transmit esoteric teachings across generations. Unlike ordinary writing, these codes relied on the reader's ability to perceive relationships, patterns, and correspondences, creating a layered system of knowledge accessible only to the initiated. In this way, the Merovingians constructed a silent dialogue across time, one that could survive political upheaval, dynastic collapse, and the deliberate suppression of history. The combination of symbolism, artifacts, and hidden codes also intersects with the broader European narrative of secret knowledge. Later groups, including the Templars and other esoteric societies, are often suggested to have inherited, preserved, or adapted these Merovingian traditions. The visual language, codified numerology, and sacred motifs could have been passed along as part of a carefully guarded intellectual and spiritual lineage. In this sense, the Merovingians were not merely rulers of a particular era, but architects of a legacy, an enduring network of symbols and artifacts designed to guide, instruct, and conceal knowledge across centuries. Even today, the fascination with Merovingian symbolism endures. Researchers, historians, and enthusiasts explore the subtle connections embedded in coins, seals, manuscripts, and architecture, seeking to reconstruct the hidden codes that once guided an ancient dynasty. Each discovery invites further questions. What knowledge was deemed too dangerous or sacred to record plainly? How much of the dynasty's legacy was intentionally concealed, and how much was lost to time? These inquiries reveal not only the sophistication of the Merovingians, but also the enduring human desire to uncover meaning in symbols, to trace connections across history, and to understand the mysteries deliberately woven into our cultural heritage. Ultimately, the study of Merovingian symbolism, artifacts, and hidden codes illuminates a dynasty that understood power in a uniquely multidimensional way. Authority was expressed not only through governance or warfare, but through visual language, material culture, and coded communication that transcended generations. These tangible traces invite us into a world where history and mysticism intertwine, where secrets survive in plain sight, and where every object, image, or architectural detail can carry a story of sacred lineage, hidden knowledge, and enduring influence. The Merovingians, through their mastery of symbols and codes, remind us that power is as much about perception, mystery, and preservation as it is about conquest or politics, and that the deepest truths often reside in what is deliberately concealed from view. With the decline of Merovingian political power, the dynasty's survival depended not on armies or kingdoms, but on secrecy, subtlety, and the careful preservation of bloodlines. The kings may have been reduced to figureheads, and their authority undermined by the Carolingians, yet their lineage, believed by some to carry sacred significance, continued, hidden from the eyes of rulers, chroniclers, and the masses. This period of exile was not necessarily a physical displacement, but a deliberate obscuration, a retreat from public life into shadowed corridors where the Merovingians could safeguard what truly mattered: their heritage, their secrets, and the mystical legacy embedded within their blood. Some historians suggest that members of the Merovingian family were sent into relative anonymity, scattered across rural estates, monasteries, and lesser-known regions of France. In these quiet enclaves, they could live without attracting the attention of powerful rivals, maintaining lineage and traditions in secrecy. Oral instruction, clandestine rituals, and symbolic communication were likely the primary methods for transmitting knowledge during this time. The dynasty's sacred customs, once performed publicly at court or during ceremonial events, were now practiced privately, hidden from the eyes of those who might seek to erase or exploit them. In effect, exile became a form of protection, ensuring that even as their public influence waned, the essence of the Merovingians endured. This hidden continuity was reinforced by marriage, alliances, and careful selection of confidants. Families of trust may have been chosen to intermarry with the Merovingians, ensuring that their sacred bloodline was preserved while simultaneously weaving it into the fabric of European nobility. In doing so, the dynasty could maintain influence indirectly, guiding political and social developments from behind the scenes. Even the Templars, emerging centuries later, are often suggested to have become part of this custodial network, safeguarding knowledge, relics, and perhaps even direct descendants, continuing the Merovingian legacy through a veil of secrecy. Exile also demanded adaptation. The Merovingians had to navigate a world that no longer recognized their authority, finding ways to protect their lineage without provoking attention. Hidden estates may have served as centers for training, ritual practice, and instruction in sacred knowledge, while discreet channels of communication ensured that important teachings and symbols were passed on. Some legends suggest that the bloodline may have spread across regions beyond France, traveling quietly into neighboring kingdoms or even further afield, always maintaining the integrity of the lineage while eluding the notice of those who sought to eliminate its influence. The symbolic aspect of exile is also significant. While outwardly the dynasty appeared diminished, the inner world of the Merovingians remained rich with ritual, knowledge, and purpose. Sacred rites, possibly encoded in manuscripts or preserved in oral tradition, allowed the family to maintain its identity and reinforce its sense of divine connection. Ceremonial objects, artifacts, and hidden symbols likely played a role in reminding the exiled family members of their heritage, offering both continuity and guidance. In this sense, exile was not simply a loss. It was a transformation, a period in which the essence of the dynasty was safeguarded for future generations, beyond the reach of historical suppression. Rennes-le-Château and other mysterious locations often cited in connection with Merovingian secrets may reflect the tangible legacy of this period. These sites, obscure yet symbolically potent, could have served as refuges, repositories of relics, or centers of ritual practice. The village's hidden inscriptions, mysterious architecture, and cryptic parchments may well be echoes of a network designed to preserve and transmit knowledge in exile. Here, history, legend, and geography converge, suggesting a deliberate effort to maintain continuity even when public power was lost. Stories of hidden heirs, secret marriages, and concealed relics abound in folklore, reinforcing the narrative of exile. Some legends imply that the Merovingian bloodline continued in secret, eventually intertwining with noble houses across Europe, preserving sacred knowledge in ways that were invisible to political authorities. Whether myth, exaggeration, or a hidden truth, these tales underscore a critical point. The dynasty's survival depended less on overt power than on the careful, deliberate maintenance of identity, heritage, and esoteric wisdom. Exile also required secrecy in daily life. Ordinary activities, education, religious practice, and social interaction likely served dual purposes, maintaining appearances while simultaneously transmitting coded knowledge. Symbolism embedded in clothing, architecture, or ritual objects may have functioned as subtle reminders of lineage and purpose. The exiled family's movements, marriages, and alliances were carefully orchestrated to preserve both the bloodline and the sacred knowledge associated with it, ensuring that each generation remained connected to the past even as public recognition faded. The consequences of exile are profound when considering the larger narrative of the Merovingians. Their story is not one of abrupt disappearance, but of deliberate concealment, a strategic withdrawal from public life to protect what was most essential. It is a tale of survival against historical erasure, demonstrating that power and influence can endure even when hidden from the world. The dynasty's retreat into secrecy may have ultimately allowed its legacy to persist in ways that would have been impossible under the constant scrutiny of rival powers or chroniclers. Legends of exiled Merovingians often intersect with Templar and Grail myths, suggesting that the bloodline, its knowledge, and sacred symbols were carefully protected by allies and secret networks. Some researchers speculate that this hidden continuity allowed for the survival of ancient rituals, the preservation of sacred artifacts, and the safeguarding of esoteric wisdom that would eventually resurface in the later medieval and Renaissance periods. In this way, exile is not a narrative of defeat, but of enduring influence, a silent, hidden force shaping European history from behind the scenes. Ultimately, the Merovingians in exile illustrate a principle that resonates throughout history. True power is not always visible, and the most enduring legacies are often preserved in shadow rather than in the public eye. By retreating, concealing, and carefully transmitting their sacred knowledge, the Merovingians ensured that their story did not end with political defeat. Instead, it became a hidden current running beneath the surface of history, a secret preserved for those capable of following its subtle trail through time, geography, and myth. In exploring this hidden chapter, we begin to see the Merovingians not simply as rulers who lost power, but as architects of a legacy designed to survive suppression, exile, and the passage of centuries. Their bloodline, their knowledge, and their symbols became a living network, a story of continuity that defied public perception, inviting us to consider the mysteries that history conceals and the secrets that endure, waiting to be rediscovered. The story of the Merovingians cannot be fully understood without examining the mysterious emergence of the Knights Templar, the order whose very existence seems intertwined with hidden knowledge, sacred relics, and secret bloodlines. Founded in the early 12th century to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, the Templars quickly grew into an organization far more powerful and enigmatic than mere warriors could explain. Their sudden rise in wealth, influence, and global reach sparked fascination, envy, and suspicion. While historians have meticulously documented their military campaigns and financial operations, a shadowy narrative suggests that the Templars' true purpose went beyond protection and profit. They may have become custodians of the Merovingian secrets, charged with preserving a lineage, sacred knowledge, and relics that the world was never meant to see. The connection between the Templars and the Merovingians is shrouded in legend, speculation, and tantalizing fragments of evidence. Some theorists propose that the order inherited knowledge, texts, and artifacts from Merovingian descendants or allies, creating a deliberate link between a fallen dynasty and a rising military religious institution. Documents hint at the presence of sacred relics, possibly including objects associated with the bloodline itself, concealed in Templar strongholds across Europe. Architectural features of their commanderies, combined with coded inscriptions and symbolic motifs, suggest that these were more than functional buildings. They were repositories of esoteric knowledge, designed to protect secrets from the uninitiated while guiding those who were initiated toward hidden truths. The Templars' relationship with sacred sites, both in France and the Holy Land, further strengthens the notion that they were custodians of more than territory. Sites such as Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Montségur in southern France, and Rennes-le-Château in the Languedoc region are often cited as places where the order either discovered, safeguarded, or interacted with relics and knowledge linked to the Merovingians. Some researchers argue that the Templars' obsession with precise architectural alignment, hidden chambers, and subterranean vaults reflects a deeper understanding of sacred geography, a knowledge likely inherited from those who understood the mystical significance of location and lineage. These sites became both fortresses and sanctuaries, simultaneously protecting material treasures and intangible wisdom. The symbolic nature of Templar rituals offers additional clues to their custodial role. Accounts, both historical and speculative, describe ceremonies involving cryptic gestures, sacred geometry, and coded language. While the exact details remain largely unknown, the consistency of these practices across time and location suggests an underlying system of knowledge. Some propose that these rituals were designed not merely for spiritual edification, but for the preservation and transmission of information about the Merovingian bloodline. Through ceremonial practice, symbols, and coded instruction, the Templars may have maintained continuity with a lineage deliberately hidden from the mainstream historical record. Financial power and political influence also served the Templars' custodial purpose. Their extensive network of banks, estates, and fortresses across Europe could have provided the logistical means to hide relics, manuscripts, and individuals connected to the Merovingian bloodline. Wealth allowed for discretion. The order could acquire and safeguard objects of sacred or esoteric significance, shield their contents from prying eyes, and ensure that knowledge was transmitted only to those who were deemed worthy. In this sense, the Templars' material prosperity was inseparable from their spiritual and custodial mission, creating a dual legacy of influence that extended far beyond conventional military power. The order's sudden and dramatic suppression in the early 14th century, led by King Philip IV of France, is itself suggestive of the secrets they carried. Accused of heresy, blasphemy, and conspiracy, the Templars were arrested, tortured, and executed. Yet, despite the thoroughness of this campaign, many historians and theorists believe that significant knowledge, treasures, and even individuals escaped destruction. The secrecy and organization of the Templars suggest premeditation. It is unlikely that their esoteric network, including connections to the Merovingians, could be fully dismantled in a single political purge. Instead, the remnants may have dispersed into other orders, secret societies, or hidden enclaves, continuing the mission of preservation and concealment. Legends and speculation also point to the Templars as guardians of the Holy Grail, not merely as a religious relic, but as a symbol of the Merovingian bloodline itself. The Grail, often interpreted in mystical or symbolic terms, represents continuity, sacred lineage, and the preservation of hidden knowledge. If the Templars were indeed custodians of such a secret, their meticulous secrecy, coded rituals, and expansive network make sense as protective measures, ensuring that the Grail, or the knowledge it represents, remained inaccessible to those uninitiated into the deeper mysteries. Architecture, manuscripts, and folklore all hint at this possibility, leaving traces for modern researchers to piece together a narrative that links the bloodline, the order, and the enduring quest for hidden wisdom. The Templars' enduring mystique lies not just in what they did openly, but in what they concealed, transmitted, and protected. From France to Jerusalem, their legacy is embedded in architecture, coded manuscripts, and legends that continue to inspire inquiry, speculation, and storytelling. In preserving Merovingian secrets, they acted as guardians of continuity, bridging the gap between a suppressed dynasty and the broader currents of European history. Through their actions, rituals, and careful concealment, the Templars ensured that the story of the Merovingians was not entirely lost, providing a hidden lifeline across centuries of turmoil and suppression. Even after their official dissolution, the influence of the Templars appears to ripple through history. Connections between secret societies, mystical orders, and esoteric traditions suggest a continued lineage of custodianship, one that may trace its origins back to the Merovingian dynasty and its hidden heirs. This network, though shadowy and fragmented, underscores the persistence of sacred knowledge and bloodline significance, demonstrating that true secrets are rarely erased entirely. They evolve, adapt, and survive through careful guardianship, often in the most unexpected forms. Ultimately, the narrative of the Templars as custodians reframes our understanding of both the Order and the Merovingians. It suggests that their true power was not limited to political or military achievements, but lay in the preservation and protection of knowledge that transcended generations. Through secrecy, ritual, and strategic use of influence, the Templars became a bridge between a hidden past and the uncertain future, ensuring that the Merovingian legacy, encoded in bloodlines, relics, and symbols, would endure long after the public history had moved on. Theirs is a story of loyalty, discretion, and the subtle exertion of power across centuries, reminding us that the most profound influence often occurs in silence, shadow, and secrecy, rather than in the visible glare of historical record. In the early years of the 21st century, the world was suddenly reminded of an ancient secret. A novel appeared that blurred the lines between faith and history, myth and evidence, art and revelation. The Da Vinci Code ignited imaginations across the planet, drawing millions into a web of symbols, bloodlines, and forbidden truths. Yet beneath the layers of fiction and controversy lay echoes of something far older, a current that stretched back through centuries of speculation, to the Merovingians themselves, to the silent corridors of Templar fortresses and the whispered legends of the Grail. The story was not new. It had merely awakened from a long sleep. The narrative that captivated readers was seductive in its simplicity. A secret society, the Priory of Chaon, guarding a truth that could shake the foundations of Christianity. That Jesus and Mary Magdalene were not just teacher and disciple, but husband and wife, and that their descendants carried a sacred bloodline, which became the root of the Merovingian dynasty. For many, this revelation was thrilling heresy. For others, it was an allegory of the sacred union between the masculine and feminine principles, the lost balance of divinity that the institutional church had long suppressed. Whether taken literally or symbolically, the idea resonated because it touched something timeless. The desire to know that the divine once walked among us in human form, and that a spark of that holiness might still live in human blood. Behind the global sensation of the Da Vinci Code stood decades of research, pseudo-history, and esoteric exploration. In the 1980s, Holy Blood, Holy Grail had already sown the seeds of this narrative, presenting scholarly argument, imaginative reconstruction, and speculative genealogy in equal measure. Its authors traced a line from the Merovingian kings through secret orders, suggesting that the Church's suppression of the Templars was in part an effort to erase the proof of this divine lineage. The idea electrified those drawn to alternative history, a coded message hidden in plain sight, guarded through centuries by those who understood its cosmic significance. Dan Brown's novel repackaged these theories with a cinematic flair, cryptic puzzles in Leonardo's paintings, hidden geometry in cathedrals, and shadowy chases through ancient Parisian streets. But at its core lay a theme that echoed the oldest parts of the Merovingian story: the union of opposites, the restoration of the sacred feminine, and the preservation of a bloodline as a living symbol of harmony between heaven and earth. In Leonardo's The Last Supper, Brown's characters saw Mary Magdalene seated beside Christ, forming a hidden V shape, the chalice, the grail, the womb of creation. To some art historians, it was imaginative conjecture. To mystics, it was a visible echo of the old code, the blood of kings as the blood of the goddess. This notion of the sacred feminine is the heartbeat of the myth. For centuries, patriarchal theology had cast Mary Magdalene as a penitent sinner, her image distorted to serve moral instruction. Yet in apocryphal Gospels and Gnostic texts like the Pistis Sophia and the Gospel of Mary, she appears as the disciple who understood the Master best, the one entrusted with secret knowledge of resurrection. To link her to the Merovingians was to restore her dignity and place her at the foundation of a spiritual dynasty. In this telling, the Grail was never a cup. It was the womb, the vessel of divine incarnation, the feminine principle that completes creation. The bloodline thus became both literal and mystical, a family tree and a cosmic metaphor. Historians have challenged the factual basis of these claims. There are no verified genealogies connecting Magdalene to the Merovingians, and the Priory of Chaon revealed itself, at least in part, as a 20th century fabrication. Yet myth has its own kind of truth. The persistence of these stories across eras suggests that they answer a deeper need. The Grail legend, born in medieval France, already hinted that sacred lineage and spiritual awakening were intertwined. In Perceval and Parzival, the Grail is guarded by a wounded king, his vitality bound to the lands. The quest for the Grail is the quest to heal the broken balance of the world. The Merovingian narrative simply extends that metaphor. The wounded king's descendants survive, waiting for the time when the world remembers. What the Da Vinci Code accomplished was not the creation of a new belief, but the restoration of an old question: what is the true nature of the divine within humanity? In art, in architecture, and in myth, the answer has always been whispered in the same symbols: the rose and the cross, the chalice and the sword, the twin pillars, the balance of sun and moon. These emblems are not property of any one religion or order. They're fragments of an ancient teaching about wholeness. When modern audiences saw them woven into a contemporary thriller, the impact was profound. The story invited them to become seekers again, to look at familiar icons with new eyes, to consider that perhaps the most heretical truth of all is that the divine is not distant but incarnate. Yet with fascination came distortion. Popular culture often turns mystery into commodity, and what began as an invitation to inner awakening became, in many corners, a tale of hidden power and conspiracy. The idea of secret heirs ruling from the shadows captured the modern imagination as completely as the Grail had captured the medieval one. Films, documentaries, an entire internet subculture sprouted, each claiming to decode the symbols anew. Some saw the bloodline as a metaphor for enlightenment. Others believed in literal descendants hidden among today's elites. The ambiguity itself became the magic, an open door where faith and skepticism coexist. Still, beneath the noise, the central motif endures: the search for balance between masculine and feminine, spirit and matter, reason and intuition. Leonardo da Vinci's art, with its androgynous beauty and geometric harmony, embodies this quest perfectly. The artist's own notebooks speak of the marriage of science and art, of body and soul, a philosophy that mirrors the very heart of the Grail mystery. Whether or not he was privy to any secret brotherhood, his work remains a visual scripture of equilibrium, a coded reminder of unity in duality. In the quiet after the cultural storm, what remains is the resonance of the idea itself. The Merovingian Code, the Grail, the Magdalene, and the modern retellings all point toward the same realization. That divine lineage is not about royal ancestry, but about consciousness, about remembering the sacred within ourselves. Each retelling, from medieval poets to modern novelists, acts as a vessel carrying this memory forward through time. The details shift, but the melody is the same. As the camera drifts over Leonardo's Virgin of the Rocks, the voice softens. The figures glow in half-light, neither wholly divine nor entirely human. Somewhere within that chiaroscuro lies the secret that has haunted history, that the kingdom of heaven is not beyond us, but within our very blood, within our art, within our love. The story of the Merovingian Code continues not in dusty archives or guarded vaults, but in every question we ask about our origins and our potential. And so the myth lives on, reborn with each generation that dares to look beyond the surface and see the sacred patterns hidden in plain sight. Through the ages, legends of hidden kings have appeared like faint constellations in the night sky, visible only to those who know where to look. From the blood-soaked halls of Merovingian France to the candlelit chambers of secret societies, the story has always returned to the idea of a king who is never truly gone. Not a king of crowns and armies, but a king of spirit, of lineage, of cosmic order. And yet, as the modern world rushes forward, questions arise. Can this hidden royalty return? And if so, what form might it take? Are we approaching a time when prophecy and reality converge? When the ancient code, encoded in blood and symbol, awakens once more? Prophecies concerning the Merovingians are scattered across texts, oral traditions, and the writings of mystics. Some speak in cryptic numbers and celestial alignments, others in parables of light and shadow. One common thread emerges. The return of the king is tied to the restoration of balance between the material and the spiritual, the masculine and feminine, chaos and order. In medieval France, seers whispered that the bloodline would lie dormant until humanity reached a critical threshold of understanding, a moment when hidden wisdom could no longer be suppressed without consequence. The hidden king, they said, would not arrive to conquer in the ordinary sense, but to awaken consciousness itself. These prophecies are often tied to natural cycles and cosmic events. Some scholars of esotericism note the recurrence of solar and lunar conjunctions at moments when secret knowledge resurfaces. The symbolism of the bee, the fleur-de-lis, and the chalice, all associated with the Merovingians, appears repeatedly in these predictions, suggesting that their significance is more than ceremonial. They are markers, signposts left by those who understood that the bloodline was more than genealogy. It was an imprint of divine intention, a living emblem of sacred timing. Those attuned to the signs, the whispers claim, would recognize the moment when the hidden king reemerges, not as a ruler of nations, but as a catalyst for spiritual awakening. Throughout history, various movements have claimed to interpret or even hasten this return. In the Renaissance, esoteric philosophers suggested that the hidden king's influence was present in the revival of classical wisdom. In the Enlightenment, occultists like the Martinists and Rosicrucians wrote of a lineage that would guide humanity toward a new understanding of the self and the cosmos. And in the modern era, these ideas have resurfaced in both literature and esoteric circles. The Priory of Chaon, whether hoax or authentic air, positioned itself as guardian of the secret, keeping alive a symbolic lineage that could awaken at the right time. Each claim, Each text, each ritual acts as a thread connecting the present to the ancient past, a thread that might someday pull the hidden king into view. Perhaps the most compelling dimension of these prophecies lies in the human imagination itself. What is a hidden king if not a mirror of our collective desire for renewal, for the restoration of a lost order, for guidance in times of uncertainty? The world today is marked by upheaval, environmental crises, political strife, technological revolutions. In such an age, the idea of a returning figure, a symbol of balance, wisdom, and hidden power, resonates more strongly than ever. The hidden king becomes a narrative lens, allowing humanity to project hope, anticipation, and a longing for unity onto the canvas of history. Prophecy, in this sense, is both a warning and an invitation, a story that shapes the present even as it looks toward the future. The imagery associated with the hidden king is unmistakably dramatic. Candlelight glints off ancient swords and chalices. Sacred geometry radiates from cathedral floors. Symbols of the bloodline, the bee, the fleur-de-lis, the rose, appear in murals, tapestries, and forgotten manuscripts. Modern interpreters have suggested that these motifs are more than decoration. They're encoded instructions, a map for those who know how to read it. The king's return, then, is not merely an event. It is an unveiling, a revelation that has been centuries in the making. Every coded emblem, every preserved ritual, every cryptic reference in history's hidden margins forms a latticework that points toward a moment of awakening. Some prophets even claim that the return of the hidden king is intertwined with the reconciliation of the sacred feminine and masculine principles. This echoes the narratives explored in the Merovingian myths and the Grail legends. The unification of opposing forces, the restoration of wholeness. In these visions, the hidden king does not act alone. He, or the energy he represents, is part of a larger pattern, a cosmic dance between dualities, mirrored in humanity's own evolution. The Grail, long thought lost or symbolic, may in fact represent this reconciliation, a vessel, a lineage, a code of understanding that activates when humanity is ready. To seek the hidden king is thus to seek balance within oneself as well as within the wider world. Modern esoteric thinkers have suggested another layer, that the return of the hidden king is less about a singular figure and more about the awakening of potential within all of humanity. The king exists not only in blood, but in consciousness. The ancient code, the symbols, the rituals, they all serve as catalysts, tools for recognition. The hidden king is the archetype of latent wisdom, the personification of knowledge waiting to be realized. In this view, prophecy is not literal but symbolic. We do not await a monarch with a crown, but a collective shift toward awareness, an activation of insight long dormant. The code is alive, and each individual who engages with it becomes a living node in its unfolding. And so, as the narrative reaches its climax, the story comes full circle. From the dawn of the Merovingian dynasty to the fall of the Templars, from the secret societies that preserved their knowledge to the novels and films that reimagined it, a single thread persists. The hidden king is a sign, a symbol, a story that bridges past, present, and future. His return is both a promise and a question. Will humanity recognize him? Or, more precisely, the hidden potential he represents? Will we heed the call encoded in blood, in symbol, and in myth? Or will the secret remain dormant, waiting for another age to awaken? In the twilight of our modern world, as candles flicker over old manuscripts and digital screens glow with encrypted symbols, one truth becomes clear. The hidden king is not confined to history. He exists in myth, in prophecy, in the enduring fascination with lineage, power, and divine wisdom. The age of revelation may not come as a single event, but as a gradual unfolding, a recognition of patterns long hidden in plain sight. And when it comes, it will remind us that the past is never truly gone, that the bloodline before the Templars still whispers, and that the kingdom of the hidden king may rise not over lands, but within the hearts of those who remember.